Let's get some analysis now with our regular international security expert, also a national security advisor at Bondi Partners, Mark Watson, formerly with the Australian Embassy in Washington as well. Mark, thanks so much for your time. What did you make of the Abbott visit? And just as importantly, the Chinese reaction? Was it predictable?
Entirely predictable, Kieran. While from the Australian perspective, we consider Tony Abbott to be a private citizen, he's a former Prime Minister, which doesn't bestow any particular status in Australia, it was inevitable that China would see this very differently. And I don't think that Foreign Minister Maurice Payne in particular would be thanking Tony Abbott for this intervention at this time. Even though he's a former Prime Minister, China would always see this as interference in their internal affairs. Remember, the one China policy means accepting that Taiwan is a province of China and that the government of China sits in Beijing, not in Taipei. If the former Prime Minister had only spoken at a conference, it still would have attracted some adverse comment, I'm sure, from China. But the fact is he met the president, and the Taiwanese were only too happy to get plenty of coverage of those meetings and to gee it up and to use it for their own propaganda purposes.
It's also come at a time when there is a fair bit of tension at the moment in relation to the Taiwan Straits, those incursions into Taiwanese airspace by various Chinese aircraft in recent times. It's quite a tense moment in that region, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's why, as I say, I'm sure that the government is certainly not officially, in any way endorsing the Tony Abbott visit. I'm sure there'll be members of the government and some conservative commentators who will see it as simply speaking up for the rights of self-determination for Taiwan and offering some support, some moral support to Taiwan in its own confrontations with China in the way that Australia appreciates similar expressions of support. However, as you say, this is in the middle of an extremely sensitive and volatile situation. Something like 150 Chinese aircraft of different design have flown through the Taiwanese air defence identification zone. That in itself is very provocative. And each one of these interventions, whether it's Allied ships going through the Straits of Taiwan or Chinese aircraft flying through the Taiwanese ADIZ, each one of those increases the possibility of a miscalculation, of an accident that becomes an incident, that becomes a catastrophe. And unfortunately, I think things will spool up pretty quickly if there is any kind of miscalculation in this highly contested space.
Yeah, it's a worry. The Afghanistan fallout, if we turn our attention to the Middle East, that continues, including from an Australian perspective, the worrying development that Hekmatullah, the former Afghan military soldier who killed 3 ADF members, he's been released.
That's correct, Kieran. Viewers may remember that Sergeant Hekmatullah, who was a member of the Afghan security forces, turned his weapon on 3 Australian soldiers and unfortunately killed those 3 soldiers. He then fled the country, and the Australian government and its intelligence agencies mounted a 6-month-long covert operation to identify where he was, to have him arrested and brought to justice in Afghanistan. That happened in 2013. He was actually sentenced to death. But unfortunately, after serving 7 years in prison, he was part of a prisoner exchange arrangement as part of the Taliban-US peace agreement. So he went to Qatar, and now he has disappeared from view. And the government here and our officials don't know precisely where he is. That will be deeply, deeply worrying news, very sad news for family and friends and comrades of the 3 Australian soldiers who were killed.
Yeah, it sure is sad news, and difficult, no doubt, to grasp for many of those veterans. Now, the Prime Minister, he's got a lot on his plate at the moment. First of all, signing off on the policy here in terms of emissions, but then having to go internationally. It looks like he'll be going to the G20 in Rome and then the climate talks in Glasgow.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the pressure has just built. I think he was basically flying a kite when he was saying, well, maybe I'll go, maybe I won't go, just to see what kind of reaction that would get. It's pretty clear, I think, that there's a very strong push that he should attend. a mild intervention, if you would, by the Prince of Wales overnight, suggesting that this is, as he calls it, the last chance saloon and that we need all leaders on deck to address this issue. I think one of the problems, of course, is he has to have something that he can put on the table when he gets to the COP meeting in Glasgow next month. And of course, that means thrashing out an agreement within the coalition itself. It seems that he's a fair way down the path with that, but I think we'll have to wait till we get a bit closer to know exactly what the Prime Minister is going to put on the table.
Indeed. We'll be watching that very closely. Mark Watson, great to chat as always. Thanks.
Thanks, Kieran.